Well, hi, welcome to Telford Minster. We're on episode 7 of our journey through 1 Corinthians. We're in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 10 to 23 today. And the big question that we're asking is, what are we building? Now, I'm not a particularly good builder. Emily, my wife, says that when I build things, I build things slightly wonky. Nothing seems to be straight. I'm more the guy that makes the tea for the builders than gets my hands dirty. But this is what Paul is beginning to talk to us about in 1 Corinthians, that the same principles of building apply to the church. We need our strong foundations set. We need our walls to be straight. We need our roof to be on level. And the church can become strange or just doesn't quite fit when we bring in wrong doctrines or dodgy doctrines, or our fivefold ministry is slightly imbalanced, or if we're building things that really aren't on gospel principles, or in whatever way we do things, we can become unstable if our foundation isn't on Jesus alone, and we might topple over. And Paul's using that metaphor here in 1 Corinthians 3. And it says this: "By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It'll be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. You don't know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person. For God's temple is sacred, and you together are that temple. Do not deceive yourselves. If any of you think you are wise by the standards of this age, you should become fools, so that you may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight. As it is written, He catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise are futile. So then, no more boasting about human leaders. All things are yours, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas, or the word or life or death, or the present or the future. All are yours, and you are of Christ, and Christ is of God." So there we go. Paul is using that metaphor of building. So the question to us is, what are we building? If we have a look at verse 10, we're seeing that it's by the grace that God has given Paul and given to us. Paul was, of course, a persecutor of the church who went around killing them and accusing them of all sorts of things, and now is one of their primary leaders and is charged with spreading the gospel all over the Roman Empire. He was a Pharisee of the Pharisees. He was there to make sure that everyone was sticking rigidly to the law, and now has been including the Gentiles. It's all about grace. The grace that God has given to Paul and now gives to us. He says that he laid a foundation. I laid a foundation as a wise builder. The things that he did was he planted a seed, if we use the language of 3 verse 6. He planted a seed into the ground, and it's now taken hold and it's growing. He did it with wisdom. He didn't just go around and start something that wasn't going to grow. He encouraged it. He laid it with wisdom and with the people that were wise around him. Well, what did it look like? We can see that in Acts 18. It's recorded for us to have a look at it. But he found people who loved God. First he went to the Jews and then to the Gentiles. He reasoned with people in the synagogues. He found Priscilla and Aquila, who would later become leaders in the church. They were people who had fled Rome and had now settled in Corinth. They did the same job. And you can almost imagine Priscilla and Aquila and Paul, as they were making tents, they were talking and sharing the gospel in a really natural way. Maybe there are people that you can work with, even alongside on Zoom or in whatever way you're working, that you can begin to talk to them about Jesus. There was some opposition, of course. You know, the Jewish people didn't want to become Christians and began to oppose the gospel in Corinth. Something else that he did was he built the foundation of listening to the Lord. The Lord says to him in Acts chapter 18, "Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one is going to attack and harm you, because I have many people in this city." People who love God will come and join the Jesus way. And he began to teach them the word. He devoted themselves to teaching the Bible. And those are some pretty good foundations that we at Telford Minster can build on as well. About the word, about listening to the things of God. But he goes on to say in verse 10 that each one should build with care. We need to make sure that things are level and square with each other, that the roof is on, like I've said before. Because if they aren't, things can be unbalanced and it can topple over. We don't want to introduce any dodgy doctrines into what we're doing. And we need to check that Jesus is still being worshipped. Sometimes, often in our churches, worship can be worshipped and church can be worshipped and leaders can be worshipped rather than God himself. And so we need to check that we're doing things right. The ultimate foundation for any church is Jesus. Unless we're talking about Jesus, don't go there. We've just celebrated Easter, the Jesus' death and resurrection. If we're not talking about being Easter people, then don't go there. It's all about Jesus. That's the foundation that the church is built upon. Unless we're talking about Jesus, don't go there. When I was at college and as a curate, some churches would decide to say that they're not going to talk about Jesus. And if that's the case, don't go there. Because unless we're talking about Jesus, we've become a community group or a Rotary club. Because our job as Christians, our job as followers of Jesus, as Jesus' apprentices, are to share him with people. Let's not talk about the church. Let's not talk about good things all the time, although they are good to talk about. We need to be talking about Jesus. He is the author. He's the pioneer of our faith. And it's that foundation that we build things on. Foundations that might look flashy like gold or just normal like straw or hay or wood. But we're going to get checked out. He says that the fire will test if we really do have our foundations on Jesus. The fire that we're talking about here is that judgment day where Jesus comes again, that he will check that the things that we have done hold water, that they are built on Jesus' foundations rather than on something else. And that's really important for us as church leaders and as a church. Are the things we are building actually the things that look like Jesus? If they don't, let's not do that. But he will come again. It's a creedal statement for all churches that belong to the Jesus way. That he will come again to judge the living and the dead. So when we're thinking of Telford Minster, we need to remember that we will be tested by that fire. And we want it to last. Paul then reminds us about being God's temple. That the Spirit of God dwells within you and dwells within me, dwells within all of us collectively as the church. That the coming of the Spirit as a sign of inclusion into the body of the church and as a sign of adoption into God's family, that you are heirs and co-heirs with Christ. For Christian leaders, it's not about building something that looks like them. It's about building something that looks like Jesus. For Christian leaders, it's about don't destroy the temple. Don't destroy the things that Jesus is building in individuals and in groups of people. It's more about checking ourselves. Because this verse has been used so wrongly in the past, where people have been using it to talk about tattoos and piercings and alcohol and whatever we do with our bodies. It's not talking about that. It's talking about our relationship with God. This is for church leaders saying, come on guys, don't destroy God's temple. It's for us as believers saying, don't destroy God's temple by putting stuff in it that shouldn't be there. Keep it on the foundation that is Jesus Christ. And because of that, he can then say, well, don't boast in the leaders you have. Boast in God. He's been talking about this over the last few weeks. Don't boast in leaders. Boast in what God's doing. Nurture it. It's why at Telford Minster we are going to be laying the foundation on Jesus, about teaching the Bible and that only. That we're going to devote ourselves to each other, about good community, about disagreeing well where we need to. It's about gathering people together to follow Jesus' way. It's about food and communion. We're going to always eat together. We're going to be breaking the bread to remember Jesus' death and resurrection. It's about prayer and worship together that nurture the believer and raise upon the foundation of Jesus the things that he himself has been building. And then we've got that great reminder at the end. You are of Christ. You, me, the people we're gathering as believers in Jesus here in Telford. You are of Christ, and Christ is of God. You have been included. And so let's behave as people that have been included in the kingdom. So what are we building? What are you building? I hope it's something that'll last. Join us again as we look at the next chunk on Wednesday now. We've moved our dates from Tuesdays to Thursdays to now Mondays and Wednesdays. So join in with that, and then we'll chat on Thursdays together via Zoom. If you want to be included in that conversation, please drop us an email at info@telfordminster.org.uk and we'll send you the link out. I hope you've enjoyed this and do journey with us together. Bye for now.